evening and welcome to another exciting program. And we've got a mystery guest on the right, but I won't let you know until later on who she is. Now, I'm reading this off the internet, so excuse me if it sounds read, because it is. Now, what I'm about to say, you may initially wonder what on earth it's got to do with the current situation, but please stick with it. Okay. Now, conscription in the UK, and that's compulsory military service, ended in the late 1950s. The last national serviceman finished his military service in 1963. Now, what followed in that decade was an explosion of creativity and rebelliousness amongst those of military age that had never been seen before. In America, the draft continued until the early 1970s, but college students were exempt. In opposition to the Vietnam War and compulsory military service, a similar explosion of rebelliousness and creativity happened there. Throughout Europe, compulsory military service continued on until recently, with some countries such as Finland and Cyprus still enforcing it. Now let's look at the situation today with this current fake-demic. We are all conscripted, whether we like it or not, into this enormous psyops. It's a sort of military service without the military. The only difference is military service consisted of training to kill other people with guns, and this current service kills people psychologically. The most rebellious countries in Europe appear to be those where compulsory military service was abolished relatively recently, such as France. It was abolished in 1996, Germany in 2010, and Poland in 2009. The point I'm getting to is if you oppress people long enough, especially the youth, a human volcanic eruption happens, as the human spirit cannot be suppressed for long. We may get depressed and angry when seeing stupid people prancing around wearing their Muppet masks. But remember, people in the late 40s and throughout the 1950s accepted conscription in the UK. But as with a volcano, all may appear well and peaceful, but deep underground, there's probably a magma chamber about to explode at any moment. Please think through what I've just said. Now, tonight's guest, as you probably guessed, is Caroline Stevens. And welcome, Caroline.
Thank you, Chris. I've got a technical hitch here. I can't see you. So if anybody puts any questions up on your screen tonight, I've lost you somewhere on my laptop. But I take it you can see me.
I can see you. You're sort of staggering around, but I can actually hear what you're saying. But I think it's something to do with bandwidth or something like that. So as long as we can communicate with each other and everybody else can see we're all right, let's carry on. Now, you've got something very interesting to say, although he's not a very interesting character, about Jolly Boris.
Well, Doris, there's a lot to say about Doris, because just before I came on air, I read the story about him cycling 7 miles away from home at the weekend. He got spotted. He obviously wasn't wearing a big enough mask. He was spotted. And so now when we've got people who've been fined in Derbyshire for jumping in the car, having a walk in a beauty spot 2 meters apart, he is surrounded by security guys, I believe, and he is 7 miles away. So I don't know what it's going to take for the population to wake up and realize that it's one rule for the Sun King and another rule for us minions. That's presumably why they produce those little shows called The Minions and Despicable Me. So what else do we know about Doris, apart from the fact that he's been out cycling? He's had his grandmother, his child's grandmother, come to stay. So does this now mean that is this an indication he's not going to allow grandparents to see their grandchildren in the future? So he's been able, at the taxpayer's expense, no doubt, to move Carrie's mother into is it number 11 they live in, or do they live in number 10?
I don't know.
So, it's just so that they can see each other, be part of a family bubble, whereas up and down the country, there are families absolutely bereft. You've got people in care homes who've not seen their children and their grandchildren for some 10 months now. So that's another thought that, it's this big divide now, and it must surely be becoming apparent to the population of this divide. What else have we got about Boris? Well, he attended, well, I spoke earlier about Prince of Wales. He was talking about the Terra Carta, which he had modelled on the Magna Carta. And of course, some people will say, well, actually, the Magna Carta was only written for the benefit of the barons. So with that in mind, if you think about it, the Terra Carta is seemingly being written with the global elites in mind, and the royal family. They're all part of the same kit and caboodle. And this is all about sustainability, the climate, putting nature first at the people's expense. Now, I did do a little speech this afternoon, as I say, about the Terra Carta, because this is something that Prince of Wales talked about in his speech in Paris today at the One Planet Summit. Now, that's all very well and good for these elites to be imposing this on us. They want to make it, the Paris Agreement, the climate change agreement, even more onerous on us minions. So that's going to mean lots more money, and it's going to be about becoming a one world global economy with no national borders, as I see it. We're going to be helping our neighbours out, whether they be in India or Bangladesh. And that was topped off later on in the day, because actually Doris has pledged your inheritance, your children's inheritance, because now he's committed £3 billion. Of course, he's pledged so much money on the global vaccination plan last June. He's now committed £3 billion climate finance towards protecting global biodiversity. So it seems like we're leading the way for all this expenditure, splashing the cash. The UK, but of course, Boris, if you remember, said that these reports in connection with child abuse, they were a waste of money, if you remember. So now Boris is saying the UK will commit at least £3 billion to climate change solutions that protect and restore nature over the next 5 years, while also boosting support for green energy in developing countries. And that's what he announced today. So this multi-million-pound commitment aims to accelerate efforts to protect biodiversity-rich land and ocean ecosystems, helping shift to a more sustainable food system and supporting the livelihoods of the world's poorest, the PM will say at this summit. And it will be allocated from the UK's existing commitment of 11.6 billion for international climate finance. So is this in addition to international aid budget? So everybody was saying, oh, at least we're going to put, we're going to ring fence now. We're going to keep a containment of the international aid budget, but we've got this international climate finance budget, specific programs set to receive support, including the Blue Planet Fund for marine conservation, projects to maintain forests, and tackle the illegal timber trade and deforestation, and initiatives to conserve habitats such as mangroves that protect communities from the impact of climate change, according to Downing Street. Who was trashing our global environment anyway? But it was the globalists. So now we have to foot the bill for what they've done to our planet. So what else? This was in France. There was Macron there, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, the Prince of Wales, and Angela Merkel. So this financing biodiversity at the summit also includes Dominic Raab and COP26 President Alok Sharma, set to convene a roundtable on the clean power transition alongside Guterres, bringing together ministers from 8 African and European countries. Raab is expected to pledge £38 million of UK money to the Climate Compatibility Growth Programme, which supports developing countries to accelerate their transition to green energy while growing their economies. So we have got a government that has totally gone rogue. They don't care what they do. They really are laughing at us. I don't know, Chris, if you watched Hancock and Co. I think it was a guy called Powys with your namesake, Stephen Powys, the PHE director or something or other. He was speaking with Hancock tonight, talking about the national vaccination programme. So I thought, well, you know, when I see these people on TV, I like to know who's talking to me. Why are they being invited on the show, apart from their title? What's their background? And of course, well, he worked for the Royal Free Hospital. His specialism is renal treatment. I'm not sure that this COVID situation fits into renal treatment. That's his specialism. Royal Free, when he was working there, he was involved in a project to share information with Google Deep Minds. So what's the Google Deep Minds? Well, it's a British artificial intelligence subsidiary of Alphabet, which was acquired by Google in 2014. So it's joining the dots bit by bit, and why they want you to be vaccinated, linked, you know, this history of artificial intelligence. And I think for a lot of us still, it's a bit of a mystery how this is all going to play out. Wouldn't you agree?
I 100% agree. But what gets me is these people who are supposed to be experts, so-called experts. I've worked with so-called experts, and I'll give you a perfect example. This is 100% truth. A structural engineer whose mummy and daddy put him through university, who had qualifications coming out of his ears. He'd studied this, studied that, studied everything you'd wish to think of, but he could not apply that knowledge to anything practical. And I'll give you a perfect example. He couldn't work out how to fold a piece of paper to turn it into a door wedge in summer to wedge the door open. He actually stood there and he literally could not think it through how you would fold a piece of paper up and wedge it under the door. He put the plain sheet under the door and it's closed, and we all sat there watching him. And he just couldn't. And that was the nutter I talked about that kept putting his bike out, chaining his bike outside. And thieves would come along, and it was a quick release wheel, and he just chained the front wheel up, and people just came along and stole the main bike and left the front wheel there. And he did this several times because he could not think logical. And this is what we've got in Parliament today, people who can't think logical. Because this PCR test, you can find almost anything in it. For example, our ancestors, they believe, the ones that went through the plague, and I think it was the plague during the Middle Ages, the ones that survived had an immunity to it. And if you had a PCR test that could look for the plague in all Europeans, they would say, it's gone over the top. People are going to be collapsing because of the plague. Look, because we've all got a little bit of that plague in us, but it's an antibody. And this is what we've got. You can find anything in it. But if you go onto YouTube, and I'll just put this up, where is it now? And you look up Dr. Sam Bailey, she's a New Zealand doctor, with Dr., and I can't pronounce his surname, Klaus Kohnlein, sounds like colon, doesn't it? It's German, very nice man, on YouTube. Now, Dr. Klaus Kohnlein, and I know I've pronounced his surname wrong, is a leading expert in viruses. He is the top man. And now this is my interpretation, and I don't want to put his name into disrepute or anything like that, because we all have different interpretations of what we see. But my personal interpretation of what he was saying is that what is happening now is just seasonal FLU, and I won't say it out because of YouTube. And it's nothing to worry about, nothing at all to worry about. But it's being used. And he said the big problem, we've got a pandemic with the piece, this test. That's the pandemic, because they're finding traces of a type of mutation of FLU, which is seasonal, but it's being used for political purposes. Now I'm going on to what I believe. I believe it's to do with United Nations Agenda 2030, which is basically an economic reset. And this green agenda is nothing to do with green, because when you look at electric cars, they actually use lithium batteries, and there's lithium mines in Africa that are absolutely raping the earth. They're digging lithium out. It's fake green. And these stupid windmills are killing birds and wildlife and causing terrible problems. So it's fake green. It's nothing to do with really green. All it's really to do with is cutting the world population so that a minority can have a jolly nice life, whilst machines and automation can give them the goodies that they want, whilst the rest of us perish. And that's what it's all about. All communism is obsessed with overpopulation. And if you look through history, Mao, Stalin, what did they do? They actually exterminated vast areas of the population. And that's exactly what they've got planned now. It's communism. And it comes from Maurice Strong, who's now dead, but he had close ties with China. And he was, shall we say, the architect of what is happening now. Look up Maurice Strong. And that's it. That's what I believe. Over to you, Caroline.
Well, gosh, I don't know where to take this now, because I was looking at somebody's post this afternoon, and it quoted a leak about what a tier 6 would look like. And it was so horrific. You know, to actually have an allocated supermarket slot to only be able to go out once a week for an hour. And you've got to have a good reason for going out. It's, and I talk about the climate and talk about the amount of money that has been lost, the way our lives have changed. People used to like going out for bargains, the sales. They used to like to go to car boots and recycle that way, and like to do charity shops and that sort of thing. All this is all going by the wayside. And I don't know if anybody out there has bought something for somebody at Christmas. It might not fit, and they bought it in a shop and they can't do anything with it because they can't take it back to the shop now. And same with airplanes. I was due to go to Lisbon for a conference, and it was at the end of March. And who was it? There was going to be somebody quite senior there from the EU. Manuel Barroso was going to be there. And I'd put it off buying the flight because it was coming out of the household budget, if you like, to Lisbon, but the accommodation was being paid for. But I put the flight off, put it off, and then I thought, well, surely this event is going to go ahead because, you've got these bigwigs there and they're not going to cancel it now. But of course, on the other side of the coin, the bigwigs, they're not paying for it out of their own pocket. So it doesn't matter to them whether things got cancelled or not. And sure enough, it did get cancelled. And then, of course, you get offered a flight later on in the year, but the event isn't going to be scheduled till the following year. So you hang fire, you don't get your money back. And I know a lot of people had problems anyway trying to get their money back from flights. And of course, now you get an email this morning from, there was an article basically that said anybody who's put off getting those flights, they haven't got long to redeem those flights. And of course, we're not allowed to fly. So this is, this is another example of how ordinary people have been impacted, not to mention, obviously, the unemployment, that people still paying rent and rates for properties that they are not transacting their workplace, not transacting any work from anymore. And so just when the government, it just bemuses me when I hear on the radio, oh, the government's promising £1,000 for these businesses. Well, anybody who's run a business and got premises, what's £1,000 going to do? And of course, you see, it's not free money. It's like, our government spending all this money on climate change. It's not coming out of their pockets because they've all got shell companies out of Finchley Road. They're all embroiled in the Panama Papers, the Paradise Papers. None of that has gone away. None of it has been tackled. So when I see this fake news going around social media about this person being arrested and that person being arrested, why would it change now? There is nothing. We are moving into, Prince Charles has said, this is it. This is the first day. We must make changes starting from now. And if anybody was going to have anything done to them, it would be, surely the royal family would have been locked up by now, some of the members there, but they haven't. So it's totally illogical to think that anybody else would get arrested under this current planetary regime, wouldn't you say?
Well, you're right, because I think that people won't do anything until the boot, as Yuri Bezmenov quite correctly said, is firmly kicking them up the backside, and by that time it's too late. That is the big problem. But I do think it is affecting. I've noticed, compared with last year, during the first lockdown, there's more cars on the road and people are becoming a little bit more cavalier, and I'm pleased to see that. But I'm finding it, I'm the type of person, I can be on my own for a long time. It doesn't really bother me that much, but I'm actually finding it claustrophobic. It's getting on my nerves. I can't go here, I can't go there, I can't go overseas if I want to. And I find that very, very intimidating. And there's a kind of intimidating atmosphere, because that is what a PSYOP is all about. And this is what I said last week. A PSYOP is what it actually tells you. It's an absolute. You always know it's a PSYOP because it's an absolute. Yes, there is a FLU problem. No, there isn't. It happens every year. If you look at a friend of mine, Ron, give him a call. Hello, Ron. He sent me this newspaper. Now, I don't know whether this is controlled opposition or not. I don't know at this stage. I will keep an open mind.
Eric's holding a newspaper.
That's right. It's called The Light.
I believe, but I can't see it because I'm in the dark. But it's
called The Light, and it's called a truth paper.
Okay.
Now, I don't know whether this is controlled opposition or not. I will keep an open mind. I'd just like to say thanks, Ron, for sending it. And I've looked at it, and it's very, very good journalism. It's excellent journalism, and it really is. And they've got statistics here. Now, there's loads of statistics.
Oh, I've got you back. I've got you back. I've been closing my tabs. I've got you back.
What's that?
I've got you. I can see you now.
Hello. Not a pretty sight, I know. I should have combed my hair.
I better take it back again.
But correction, I don't say hair, I say hairs. I think there's about 3 or 4 there left. But you know, it's got here.
It's all right for you. You don't have to. You don't need to go to the hairdressers, do you? In lockdown, I mean, for people like myself, it's more problematic.
Yes, the old razor up the back, and there we go. Mind you, I do miss having long hair, because when I did have hair, I did have it down to my shoulders. And if I had a full head of hair, I would have it down to my shoulders now, because I don't believe in cutting your hair. There's a very interesting article about that, and apparently it keeps your wisdom and it acts as like an antenna, but that's something completely different for another show. But what I'm saying here, that they've actually got here.
Just saying, long hair acts as an antennae.
Yes, very, very briefly, I'll go off on a tangent now. During the Vietnam War, they got an Indian tribe to do tracking in Vietnam. And before they went to Vietnam, they got a Marine haircut. And when they got there, they couldn't track anything. They couldn't quite work it out. This is strange. Until the people looking at it discovered that if they didn't shave their hair, they could track. And then I think it was Yale University, looked into it. And the scientists that did look into it decided to grow their hair long, because apparently it gives you a sort of intuition and wiseness. So that's where I got it from. And there's an article on the internet, and I think I've got a banner here. Oh no, I got rid of it. That's a shame. But there's an article on there. An Irish lady did a very, very interesting thing about it, and she looked into it thoroughly. And hair has magical properties, and they reckon that this women and that have long hair, and men that have long hair, it's a kind of, look at these yogis in India. They have hair down their shoulders, and I know that some religions, I think it's Hindus, I think it is, they don't cut their hair, or they trim it. So it's the magical qualities of hair, and I think it's called Truth or something like that. That's on the internet. But Sandra,
it says truth or what? You went a bit strange then. Truth.
Right. I'm a bit strange, I know. It's Truth 444. If you look up Sandra Barr, Barr, she did a very interesting article on it. So it's Sandra Barr, and she really did her homework on this. And it's like hair, you should never use shampoo on your hair. I'm not a very good advert, but I don't use shampoo. I use bicarbonate of soda and honey, and that's what she suggests you use. And you rinse it with rainwater and 2 parts apple cider vinegar if you want healthy hair. Well, I have got healthy hair, what's left of it, but unfortunately I've lost my hair because it's in your genes, and I've changed from leaving to wrangling. It's made no difference. That's a terrible joke, isn't it?
Right, so onto the newspaper. I distracted you, which is never a good thing. So what's it called? The Light. And where's it from? America?
No, it's English.
Is it?
Yeah, but it's well, I say it's English. There's no real addresses on it, but you can tell by the spelling with colour with a U and things like that. It is English, because if it was American, it'd be colour with no U and things like that. And it's called The Light, a truth paper. And the journalism is very, very good. I'll keep an open mind whether it's controlled opposition or not. Let you make up your mind. But if you look that up, you might look on DuckDuckGo. Don't go on Google, you won't find it. Look up The Light, a truth paper. There's a website here. It's called thelightpaper.co.uk. So it's all one word, thelightpaper.co.uk. Go on to there, but again, it's very vague where it comes from. There's no address or anything like that. But again, I'm completely 50-50 whether this is controlled opposition or whether it's genuine. I want to believe it's genuine.
When you say The Light, you mean L-I-T-E as well, don't you, rather than The Light?
Oh, it's L-I-G-H-T.
Oh, it is L-I-G-H-T.
Yeah, it's the, and then keep this all in one, the lightpaper.co.uk. And their articles, Sorry?
What does it talk about?
Well, it talks about what's going on at the moment. I mean, these are some of the things. It says quarantine is for sick people being locked up. Tyranny is healthy people being locked up, which is very true. And there's very in-depth, well-researched articles in there. They've got here, for instance, a graph which says they've got into the Freedom of Information Act, and they've requested to show just 100 COVID, I won't say it obviously, deaths from 2.4 million people in the public sector workers since crisis began. And here it's got here, councils have got 954,423 employees, and they've had 34 deaths. But remember, those 34 deaths, they could have died of something else, but they've done a test and they found traces of that COVID in this PCR test, which is inaccurate. So it could be from seasonal FLU. You just don't know. The NHS, there are 910,465 people. 59 have died. Very low.
Really? Well, I noticed the, yeah.
There's two more here. Sorry, Caroline. I just mentioned these two. Police and fire service, 153,819 employees, one died. And the last one is universities, 332,761 people, 6 have died.
Can you let me have a copy of that, and then can you just like do a screenshot of that, and then can you put it on your timeline, and then I'll share it?
Well, I'm actually showing that there. If you go onto that website, you can actually download the newspaper, and it's the November edition that I'm looking at, and it's on page 3, and you can download it onto PDF. And that's what I'm. There's new editions. I'm not sure if the January one's out yet, but there's a December one. And again, it's THELIGHTTER.co.uk. And again, I'm 50-50 with controlled opposition or not. I'll keep an open mind. I want to believe, and what I've seen so far, that it's genuine. But whoever is behind this newspaper, it must be.
We don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know who's spreading it.
It's very high quality, very high quality, very, very good. They've also got a page 5. It says masks causing brain damage, says neurologists. It's an excellent article. And this neurologist, Dr. Margrethe, it's another German surname, sorry, Grace Brisson, MD, PhD, is a consultant neurologist and neuropsychologist with a PhD in pharmacology, with a special interest in eutoxicity, environmental medicine. I mean, she's the top, and she reckons that putting a mask over your face is one of the most dangerous things you can do. But you can read it for yourself in the newspaper. And it's the November issue, page, closed it now. Page summit. Page 5. So there we go. So
I got sent the deaths details from the ONS for last year, and that was for England and Wales. And it was, the total number of deaths were less than in the years of 1995, 96, 1990, 91, and 2018. So but you know, this possible tier 6, if it gets any worse than what we're in now, and it's really bad enough now, especially what with the weather being so poor and not going out into the garden, if you're lucky enough to have a garden, you might as well be in prison, because you would actually, I'm sure you would actually have more trips out of your cell than you would out of your house under this tier 6. I mean, don't prisoners get an hour out each day? And if they're saying an hour out each week, and you're sourcing your food, you might as well go to prison.
Well, also, but I know what they're doing. They broadcast, and the mass media put out something that's really stringent, and then they back off from that when the government says so. The government will announce something that's less stringent. They do that all the time. So people go, "Oh, that's when the government make an announcement, they say, oh, it's not as bad after all. That's okay." So what they will probably do is what they did in France, correction, it's Portugal, don't hold me on this, where they got a curfew. So you're not allowed out after 8 o'clock. Which can't quite work out why. And it's between 8 o'clock and some 6 o'clock or something in the morning. And it's all disciplining people. It's to get you worn down to your lowest. It's what a torturer actually does. They get a person, it's like sleep deprivation. They deprive a person of their natural functions. And then once they got them down to the lowest, they can then control them. But there's another way of looking at this. Psychopaths thrive on stress and creating hell for people. And the psychopaths that are running the show, and it is a show, are probably having an absolute field day. They're loving it. I mean, for example, when Charlie Boy went to France for this conference, has he had to go into quarantine for 2 weeks?
Well, I think he was done virtually, but you mentioned about acting, and he did actually mention about actors in his speech. So we are on the right track. They're the ones that are acting. But I tell you what really, really upsets me most of all is the impact on our children. Because I was watching Going Underground on RT earlier this morning, and it was his name, Afshan Rashajani, or whatever his name is. He was interviewing a guy who'd worked, I think, for Trump, gave him advice over in the White House. And I'm sure he said something along the lines of 1 in 4 children between 18 and 24 in June had tried to commit suicide. Now, I'm hoping that I got that wrong. I really am. But I think it just gives you it's just really shocking. And you know, if you don't have loving parents around you, if you don't have a roof over your head, or if you're what did they call them? They surf the sofas, don't they? Sofa surfing. And yet we still house the people coming into this country in 4-star hotels and feed them, so they have no problems with their nutrition. They're clothed, they've got warmth. And what have we got? You know, seeing the homeless still in my local town, well, a town a few miles away, before we went into a lockdown. And, you know, I was giving out clothes of mine, things that people wouldn't normally give, people overlook. And, you know, because I thought, well, what's the point of giving it to a charity shop? Because I just knew there's going to be the lockdown. And then, because we didn't go into tier 4 at the same time as everybody else. We were part of the 22% that didn't. So we could go out on Boxing Day, etc., etc. So I went down to the homeless and gave them some clothes because I could see what was happening in the rest of the country. And I just thought, well, these clothes are going to languish in a charity shop. They'll probably charge an exorbitant fee on them if they should ever reopen. And anyway, by the time we reopen, it'll be a different season altogether. So it's far better just to give now direct to the people that need it.
Exactly what I do. I mean, I won't say who they are, but I know some people overseas who live in a motor caravan. They were on a site where they had electricity. They were quite safe. And because of bureaucracy, they were given 3 days to leave. and with the threat of a fine. And they've now left, and now they're in shivering cold. They've got no electricity, and they've gone from bad to worse. Now, if the local council had let them be, they'd be quite safe. And they are, but no, they had to move on because it's law that you couldn't stay there in a motor caravan. Now, this it's cruel. And then the other thing is, you're not allowed to sit down on a seat now. Apparently, if you sit down, you can get arrested. You're not allowed to loiter. And there's people with some women in Brighton that were arrested for sitting down and drinking a flask of tea. I mean, this is getting beyond belief. But I've got a feeling that what they want to do, they want to create an anger in people, because you notice that when you look at high streets now, all that's open is really the big multinationals, you know, like the big supermarkets and people like that. I mean, I went to my local market last Friday, and it's normally bustling with different stalls selling all kinds of things that you can find in a market. The only stalls that are allowed to open are food stalls. So there were 3 stalls: greengrocers, chap that sells tins of food, and a lady that sells sweets, and that was it. And of course, because there's no attraction there, they're sitting there twiddling their thumbs. They're not getting any work in. And you know, I bought some things, and they're absolutely falling over themselves. Like, oh, thank you so much, because I was about their first and only customer there. You go into the supermarkets, and I won't mention the name what supermarket it was, and oh crumbs, you got a queue. There's loads of people there. And what's annoyed me now, I do not wear a muzzle for several reasons. One, I am exempt because you know, I'll get asthma, so that's quite legal. But even if I wasn't, I still wouldn't wear one, because I've actually read the article in this newspaper, and I've also done my own research. It's an exceptionally dangerous thing to put a piece of cloth over your mouth, because you're actually creating a breeding place for bacteria. And they reckon that bacterial pneumonia is going through the roof now because people are breathing in their own CO2.
Well, apparently it also, I read somewhere that if you've got an O blood group, you are particularly susceptible to getting those infections through the moisture. And, you know, that's why I've been covering about blood groups quite a bit on my timeline, because there are certain blood groups, for example, the O blood group, that pretty well manages to get by through this flu-like pandemic anyway, because if you haven't got any underlying conditions, the O blood produces the fighting agents to keep it at bay, seemingly. So it's like the people are queuing up for this vaccination, and obviously most of these people at the minute are over 80. Well, how many people over 80 are not taking at least one other medication by the age of 80? It can't be that great a percentage. So the MHRA, the Medical Research Authority, I think that's what it is, Medical Health Research Authority, MHRA anyway, they never actually authorized for this rollout for people who were already taking other medications. And that's and you know, the 6 million people are now on antidepressants in this country. I mean, it's that. So they're taking medications.
Well, let's face it, Caroline, I don't know about you, but I'm normally a happy I like to believe I'm a happy, chirpy person. That's for other people to judge. But I've got depressed because of this, because I went out last Friday. It's depressing weather. It's a depressing atmosphere. Shops all closed. It's like the end of the world. And you see people walking around with these muzzles all over their faces. It psychologically gets you down. And when I got home, you know, I had to have a strong cup of tea and revive myself. It really got me depressed. And I really feel for people that are prone to depression, especially in the winter. And they're piling it on and piling it on and piling it on, so that people will have this squirt of Bill Gates special in their arms. But I'm very much into natural medicines and homeopathic, and because I believe that there's a cure for almost everything in the ground and in the earth if it's natural. And I won't go into it deeply, but the NHS was founded in 1948 on a fraud. And there was well-meaning politicians such as Nye Bevan and people like that who believed that they were doing right. And I'm not criticising them. And people thought, oh, this is fantastic. But the NHS survives on PR. People say, oh, it's marvellous. Oh, it's fantastic. Oh, it's great. Because if you tell a lie long enough, you believe it yourself. But really, it's nothing more than a pharmaceutical cocktail.
Well, can I just say that if anybody is just tuning in, it's Caroline Stevens Seeking the Truth, and it's Eric von Essex. And please do share this video. I'd like to say that we're not going to get at people in the NHS, because I know that a lot of people probably joined the NHS because they really did care about other people. But I think it's quite obvious that the systems, the powers that be, it's like every empire. I mean, I've worked in places, as you have, where we've been asked to do things that we've not wanted to do. And it's obviously, for me, it's not been life-threatening what I was asked to do. But I still rebelled. So I still rebelled. And, you know, but if you are so desperate for the money, and it's very difficult, because when you, as the number of employers reduce, you can't just say, oh, I'm just going to chuck this job in. I'm going to be talking about before the pandemic. You can't just say, oh, goodbye, employer, I don't like you anymore. I'm going to go off to the competitor down the road. Because over the past years, these competitors have all been gobbled up. So, you know, if you fall out with one employer, probably your career is totally scuppered. You know, do you see what I'm saying?
I see what you mean. And also, you're going to get very highly educated people stacking shelves in supermarkets. Yeah. That's what's going to happen. You know, college students and university people, possibly doctors who have been struck off for speaking the truth. They'll probably be, you know, stacking Kit Kats on the shelves and whatever. Because I've found this quite a lot, where you get people that are overqualified for the job, and we're known as useless eaters. And I really do believe it's a population goal. That's exactly what they want, because when you look at UN Agenda 2030, it says it clearly what they're going to do. They want to rewild the earth and only have a minority of people, the 1% who they believe they're the elite, and a handful of workers to give them a very good life. And that's it. And if you go on to richplanet.net, somebody I know called Richard D. Hall, and you look at his latest video, which he doesn't go onto YouTube and he doesn't go onto these normal ones, because he does it from his own server. If you look at his latest one, where a woman who worked from the banks in America speaks, it is absolutely fascinating. She's done her research. She speaks from her experiences, and it is an eye-opener. It's jaw-dropping. So please go on to richplanet.net. It's well worth seeing. Now, do you fancy, I don't know if you've got anything more to add, Caroline, because I was going to go have a look in chat and we could go through a few things.
Yeah, I'm just going to finish off with, by the way, you know, I did those common purpose videos. I did part 1, part 2, part 3. Part 1 was basically the overview of the attendees and the talk about the vaccinations and what the police wanted to do and the marketing side of it all. Part 2 covered the number 5 and the, you know, the letter G. So that was part 2. That was the aspect with Deloitte UK and collecting data for the grid. And then part 3, I explained what common purpose was actually all about and who was involved in the setup of it. For anybody who's been looking on YouTube to find part 2, that has been removed. That just reminded me when you said about Rich Planet. He's doing his own thing from his server. It really is true that videos do get taken down. As you know, my channel was taken down, and even now my friend is setting up putting my videos on her YouTube channel, And again, she's now got a strike because of the common purpose and the number 5 and G. So there was something else I was going to say. Yeah, just to finish off with, this event that was held today, Prince Charles had mentioned the aims of the Terra Carta, which we're all going to pay for by hook or by crook. It's going to be met. They actually want to exceed the goals and targets outlined in the Paris Climate Agreement. And it's going to look at the Sustainable Development Goals. And it's also going to broaden the definition of sustainability beyond simply net zero transition to be inclusive of nature, people, planet, equality, and prosperity. So this will be where nobody is left behind. And we're going to be giving what, if we've got any wealth left, which I doubt we have, but we're going to be taxed to the hilt just to give it away to other countries. So what have people made of today's show? Because we've been on almost 50 minutes, haven't we?
That's right. Well, this is communism. That's basically what it is. But I'll just read out a few now. Please excuse me if I miss some of you and I missed you out. Please don't take it personally. I am human. So I'm just going to skip through a few here. There's a funny one that Eamon Viewdama said, what a windbag Charles is. He could cut emissions by shutting his mouth. Yes, I agree with that one. Now we go down a little bit and let's have a look here. And we've got Biden is going to be doing a huge push on the green front. Yes, the big banks love him. Now, apparently, Trump has done a message on the internet. I don't know. I was going to read it now, but I don't know whether it's fake or not, because I've heard so much about the Pope being arrested. No, he hasn't. Julian Assange being released. No, he hasn't. Loads of paedophiles being arrested. No, they haven't. But very, very quickly, apparently, he said here, and it's on Parler, Donald J. Trump, it says, I have invoked the Insurrection Act of 1807 to address the treasonous rebellion conducted by Democrat and Republican lawmakers, CCP agents, the FBI, DOJ, whatever they are, CIA, and others, to undermine, corrode, and dismantle the United States of America and its Constitution. These entities pose, that's interesting, he said, whoever this is, these entities pose a direct threat to national security. I'll remain president indefinitely until all domestic enemies are arrested. Now, make of that what you will. I don't know whether it's true, false, or what. So that's what I was sent anyway.
All I will say is that all this artificial intelligence, when I was looking at Stephen Powis on the internet tonight, there are links here between this artificial intelligence and Peter Thiel, who's Palantir, who's Trump's #1 financial supporter or backer at the last presidential election. So the Bilderbergers are getting their own way. They're getting all their feet underneath the table for artificial intelligence. And away they go. They've got the NHS data. And it just makes me think that, you know, when you sign forms and say, oh, you don't want your information disclosed to anybody, you don't know whether they're ever going to adhere to that at all, do you?
No, I don't trust anything from the government at all. My attitude is you might as well trust the mafia or some bloke down the road who wants to offer you a genuine Rolex watch for 20 quid. I mean,
well, what was that? Mangrove swamps are going to be declared
carbon sinks, and the banks will use them to back currency. That's interesting. It says here, developing countries have gone along with that in return for having some of their debt forgiven. Yes, and this green agenda is keeping their populations in poverty because they've got, I mean, for example, with coal-fired power stations, they've now got scrubbers in them that are so clean they do not pollute the environment at all. And it's a very simple technology. If anything goes wrong, they can repair it. And of course, Africa has got areas of huge coal deposits. So that could be used to, shall we say, bring the standard of living up in some parts of Africa. And and if that happens, it's going to become more inventive, and they will find something that's not nuclear, that's clean, that will do it. We won't need to have coal-fired power stations. But the old idea of pumping loads and loads of black coal out the top of a power station is from, shall we say, the dark ages. No, they've got scrubbers on them now that are very clean. So that's another thing. And we got here, what's it? Blackmail, basically, and the central banks will profit. Again, I apologize for not reading them all out. We've got here, Germany proves that green energy isn't enough to run a country. That's right. Apparently, even I think it's Musk, allegedly, I believe, has said that we won't have enough power to run the electric cars. A countryside full of wind turbines and solar panels, and they still have to grab from coal power stations in Poland, Austria, etc. That's correct. And we got here, I think it's human RNA cells release RNA all the time for all kinds of reasons. That's interesting. We've got here, was it blackmail by the IMF? And it says another one here, that's from Ralph Emmem again, is the body's response to stress and toxins being passed off as the cause. Well, that's right, because Pasteur, what's his name? The chap who introduced pasteurization, Pasteur, was a fraud. And he actually admitted he faked his experiments. Sorry?
He was a fraud, Louis Pasteur.
Louis Pasteur was a fraud, along with Einstein, because Einstein, allegedly, I believe, he worked for a patents office. And the theory of relativity apparently was discovered in 1870 in London. So, yeah, I think he wrote one science paper in his own entire life. But because he looked like a mad scientist, he was accepted.
No, it's because it came from a certain cult. Somebody mentioned about solar panels, and actually, I've been reading up about them again tonight, and from an article in America 2 and a bit years ago now. And it says, because of course our government wants us to all have wind turbines, which is a big problem, and also.
Can I cut in there? Sorry, Caroline.
Yeah.
Phil has come up with a beauty. He said, a wind turbine never gives back the energy it takes to manufacture, run, and then dismantle at the end of its 25-year lifespan. Sorry about that. Carry on. Sorry.
And yeah, exactly. So problem with solar panels, one of the problems, just one, it says that solar panels, they operate for 20 to 30 years, but again, they lose productivity over time. And it said there's an estimation of 250,000 metric tons of solar panel waste in the world. And that was at the end of 2016. And that figure could reach 78 million metric tons by 2050. Solar panels contain lead, cadmium, and other toxic chemicals that cannot be removed without breaking apart the entire panel. While disposal of solar panels has taken place in regular landfills, it is not recommended because the modules can break and toxic materials can leach into the soil, causing problems with drinking water. They can be recycled, but the cost of recycling is generally more than the economic value of the material recovered. Used panels are also sold to developing world countries that want to purchase them inexpensively, despite their reduced ability to produce energy. Regardless, solar panel waste disposal is a problem that needs to be addressed. And I remember when I stood for Parliament in 2015, I had to research about solar panels. And I vividly remember that they had installed some in Wales, and they tested the water, and the materials in the solar panels had actually leached into the soil whilst they were installed, never mind just about the disposal. So this is actually going to trash the world. This money that is your money and our children's money and our grandchildren's money is being trashed, and then they will disappear, because I think they just think they're impervious to all of this, that maybe they're going to leave this planet. Who knows? Because why would they want to stay here with all this mess that they've created?
Well, they are, to me, they are psychopaths. That is a different subject. I really am positive they're psychopaths, because let's face it, when you look at Boris, if you or I were in his position, well, I couldn't sleep at night. I would not be able to sleep at night knowing that I'm pushing a fake agenda, getting people terrified out of their minds about seasonal FLU, and that's all it is. Because, and I'm not talking out the back of my head, because again, I'll pop that up as a banner. Please go over to Dr. Sam Bailey with Klaus Kohlen or whatever on YouTube. And I've also researched elsewhere. And if you take plenty of vitamin D, again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not an expert. I've done my own research. Do your own research. Vitamin D. I think it's very high potent. I think it's 10,000 IU, things like that. Again, if you're ill or anything like that, seek a quack, which I wouldn't do, but I've got to say that to protect myself. And eat nice green leafy vegetables and make sure you're fit. All right, if you catch a cold, you might go down with a cold, sore throat this time of the year, or the FLU. If you're reasonably fit, you'll fight it off in a couple of days or a week. And that's basically it. And in the 19...
Now, what we're for tonight, because we've been on over an hour already. So thank you so much for having me on your show, Chris, Eric, Peter, whoever you are tonight.
Oh, I'm Eric Von Essex tonight. My friends know me as Chris. And I'll tell you something, thank you very much for coming on, Caroline, because it's always educational. But all right, we've talked about the grim stuff and the nasty stuff. Please have a laugh, because when you seek the truth, as Caroline does, and I like to believe I do, it's not that dark, really, because when you seek the truth, you won't be going around going, running away from people and wearing stupid masks and doing what some moron called Chris Whitty, who looks like something from outer space, is telling you to do, who I'm sure has a, I think, well, sure, well, I won't say any more because I don't really want to go to court.
I was going to say the truth will set you free. If you've got spare time on your hands, these are quite good books. I've started reading this, The Real Good Food book. Organic isn't necessarily all fantastic, so you've got to know your stuff. You've got to know your onions, as they say. And when we say the truth shall set you free, well, then start reading that, because this, especially that last chapter, that is relevant for today. And so many churchgoers are not aware that this is required. This is your sat nav now. We've got to get pulled together and get on our knees, but not knees to Hancock for sure. Thank you, Chris. Eric.
Thank you. And remember, there's a lot to be optimistic about. And remember, have a laugh. Please share, tell others, and remember to subscribe and ding that little bell in the corner. Ding, ding, ding. And join me next week, same time, same place. Thank you very much, Caroline, and good night.
Thank you. And thanks to everybody at home for watching as well. Please share Caroline Stevens Seeking the Truth.